Your Best Manager, episode 48.
Where my current manager is always pushing me to achieve and do more and expand the circle that I influence because he sees my strengths and skills and he wants to utilize those across the organization. So I'm actually being pushed more to do better than I knew I could do.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Your Best Manager podcast, featuring interviews with senior managers and leadership experts, as well as practical advice for first-time managers. And after today's show, be sure to hop over to yourbestmanager.com and check out the free management course, Fully Engaged in 10 Days, where you will learn 3 critical components to increasing employee engagement on your team. Have fun! Imagine having your own fleet of pandas, everybody. This is Jamie Newman here, and I'm excited to be joined by Cassie Whitlock today. Cassie, how are you doing?
I am panda-tastic. We're doing well on a Friday.
Panda-tastic. That's awesome. Cassie Whitlock is the Director of Human Resources at BambooHR, which is the #1 online HR software for small and medium-sized businesses. She has a master's degree in human resources and a bachelor of science in business management with an accounting emphasis. Having worked with accounting and HR teams, she understands the importance of aligning HR priorities with business objectives. She is passionate about developing individual talent and creating productive teams. Cassie also loves to spend time with her family and is a proud mother of 2 children and 1 great son-in-law. And let me explain my opening comment really quick about the pandas. So if you've ever visited if you ever visit BambooHR.com, you'll notice a tagline that says this: the only HR software you need. BambooHR is like having your own fleet of pandas to do all of the work for you. So I thought it was funny and clever, and that's where that came from. But anyway, Cassie, before we jump in with both feet, why don't you give us an overview of your career path and just how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Jamie. So like you mentioned, I actually started my career in the accounting world. So I am a self-proclaimed numbers nerd.
Nice.
And working with small and medium-sized businesses, I was always handed the HR responsibilities. And so I changed from an accidental HR professional into a full-time one as I realized that my talents were actually more useful to a business when I focused on the people issues. Mm-hmm. So I did angle my career into human resources, but if you ask me to build a spreadsheet, I'm as happy as a kid at Disneyland. And right now, as you mentioned, I'm the Director of Human Resources at BambooHR, and it's the best job I've ever had. I love working with a company that values its employees, and then I run a team that's the tip of the spear for creating corporate culture.
So I'm curious, do you are you leveraged as a Excel wizard, or are you made fun of?
I like to make fun of myself, so nobody has to. But you'd be surprised how many meetings I'm in, and I all of a sudden have to become the numbers cruncher and help figure out how to get to a certain number.
Yeah, you know what, though? My first corporate manager was an absolute wizard when it came to Excel. And so everything that she did, she would make like these customized spreadsheets so that just everything looked prettier and clear. And I loved it. I learned so much just about taking time and attention to make things look good. I mean, the numbers I'm sure were there too, but if you can do well in Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets or wherever you put your spreadsheets, you can communicate some really effective and important things differently than people who just get lost. I don't know.
Yeah, my team laughs at me because everything I do is built in Excel. I hardly even use Word.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. Love it. Well, congratulations on building a successful career, Cassie. And here's the big question for today's interview. When you look back on your career, who was your best manager? And maybe it wasn't a manager, so it could be a mentor, but who has had the most significant influence on your career, and then why?
Sure. Well, there's actually a number of people who've played a meaningful role in my life. And I have to say that my 2 children have always been my largest influence in my life. As a single parent, I was faced with the challenge of being the only one who had to figure it out. And that means I was motivated, I was focused, and not getting it done or not achieving the goal, that wasn't going to be acceptable for any of us. And I think that the challenges I faced caused me to develop kind of an attitude of I've got this.
Yeah.
And in some ways that was really positive, and in other ways it actually harmed me based on managers I had, because I realized that that translated externally as having a lot of independence, and managers could see that I was successful and doing a great job, and because of that I ended up a lot of times just operating in solo mode.
Mm.
I mean, I rarely asked for help because I was pretty determined to just figure it out. And again, my managers saw I was doing great work, knew I was reliable, and so they kind of just let me do my stuff, because they of course had a whole list of things to accomplish, and there's never enough hours in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately I think that was actually a big mistake, because it wasn't until I began working with my current manager that I realized that maybe this is too strong of a word, but the neglect of my managers was actually holding me back. It meant that I kind of thought I was doing everything I was supposed to, and that nothing else was needed from me. And so I wasn't stretching myself in ways that I was capable of stretching. Where my current manager is always pushing me to achieve and do more and expand the circle that I influence, because he sees my strengths and skills and he wants to utilize those across the organization. So I'm actually being pushed more to do better than I knew I could do, even though I've always been considered just an excellent contributor.
Wow, that's so interesting, because it's not where I thought you were going to be going with that. Because there is, I mean, you even said it. There's a lot of value to, I guess, taking advantage of the circumstances and situation you're in. I've been a parent for 4 years, so not very long. But things change when you're responsible for someone else's life, and whether you're a parent or a single parent, there's still that you don't have an option. Like, you have to be there. But even more so if you're a single parent, like, they're relying on you. And so I like that you didn't develop a victim attitude, but you kind of took ownership of your situation. But at the same time, I think it's so interesting and so good to hear the self-awareness that you found out. Now, did you figure that out on your own, or did it take your manager saying, like, how do you make that connection? Like, maybe that's uncomfortable. I don't know.
I think I knew that all along. And so I would push myself, but I really didn't understand the scope of it until I had this manager. There's nothing like perspective, right? You can say, hey, I know the Tetons are big, tall mountains, but until you've seen them, you don't really know what it means. Right. So it really did take having experiences with my manager to realize what being held back meant to me and how much of my skill wasn't being utilized.
Yeah. So have you taken some of that type of leadership and translated it into your own team? Like, because I imagine everybody that's on your own team is different and comes with their own different tendencies.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So my team, I always tease them, like, I have really high expectations. So I do that for myself, but I do it with the team. And I really run my team kind of in a project-based perspective. I'm aware of everybody's talents, and when I know what's coming down the pipeline, I sit back and say, who do I think is probably going to need to take a strong lead on this project or for this role or task? And I don't like to assign it out to them, but when we get together as a team and I talk about what's coming, I like to give people the opportunities to step up for it themselves. And then if they don't, I'm going to push them in front of that train and say, I want you to get in front of this and I want you to take it. And I tell them, hey, I'm here for you. I will help you. You come ask questions. I will be in the trenches with you. But this is yours to get across the finish line. And everyone in this room is a resource for you, but you run this, you schedule the meetings, you give me assignments, you hold me accountable for my assignments. Mm-hmm. Let's get this and deliver a really great outcome from this.
Wow, there's a lot of good stuff there. One of the things I like is you're talking about task-based leadership, or I guess what's the situational leadership is the other one, where you're not leading based on the person, but you're leading based on what needs to get done. Which I think is good. But the other thing is I talk a lot about the need for managers to be inquisitive, and I typically refer to that as asking a lot of open-ended questions. But what you just described is not necessarily directive, but you create the space by leaving things open-ended for people to step up. One, that means you're not necessarily being controlling or dictative, but it also allows you to observe how people respond and then coach accordingly versus making assumptions. So much good stuff there. Is there anything else that we should be taking away from that?
You've got to be willing to be that example. So sometimes I will come into a project and pick the piece that I feel least comfortable with and tell the team, I'm going to take this because it's going to help me grow, and this is what I would like you to support me in. So they set the example of it's okay to be vulnerable. Like if we're going to fail, I want to all go down together, and I want to learn a ton from it and know that you have our support, but I'd rather just win. But if we're going to fail, let's do it together and learn some really good things from it.
Yeah, nice. Love it. Well, I'd like to keep talking about some of your personal experiences, and you can go either way with this, but I'd like you to kind of share the biggest challenge that you've faced, or maybe even a commonality of challenges. And so here's why you can take it either way. So you can either make the challenge that you talked about earlier more practical and maybe share an example of how that showed up. Or maybe it could be something totally different. So it's kind of your ball to play with. But I'd love to kind of talk about a challenge that you've faced or you think first-time managers face.
Well, when I think about being a manager and being challenged, I don't know that I'm different than anyone else in that the hardest challenges relate to when you have a team member who isn't performing well.
Right.
And the dread that we feel when we know we have to address it. And ultimately, you're responsible to get positive outcomes from that. Sometimes it leads down a difficult path of asking the employee to leave the organization, but hopefully, and more importantly, you're able to find a way to help that employee be successful. And so in my almost 2 decades of being in human resources, I tend to see a pattern, and it's my opinion, but it's what I'm here to offer.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we as managers let our employees down by not telling them hard things.
Absolutely.
Conversations are hard. People get upset. The feelings are hurt. But I think you have to care about them enough and be willing to invest in them enough that, like, you're going to tell them there's spinach in your teeth, right? You be that friend. There's a story I love to tell to new managers who really struggle with that balance between being a manager and managing by friendship. And I said, look, when my son was 2, he was fiercely independent, and his fine motor skills were not high enough to tie his own shoelaces. Luckily, Velcro shoes were invented, so that saved his life. But if Velcro hadn't been invented and my 2-year-old had to learn to tie his shoes and refused to let me help him, that would have been difficult. But what if you never trained your child to tie their shoes? At what age will you stop doing that? As a mother, am I a good mom if I tie his shoe when he's 2? Absolutely. What about when he's 5? Maybe. What about 10? You know, am I really going to go to his first day of college and tie his shoe for him? At that point, I have done that person a disservice. And I said, as a manager, you're doing the exact same thing if you refuse to help that employee recognize their shoe is untied and teach them to tie it themselves. And when I do that, it really gives those managers a new perspective of telling them they're not doing well enough is actually kind. And that's been really helpful to help them change that perspective of I'm not being mean and telling you something bad about yourself. I care about you enough to help you grow. And this is important. If you want to be successful in your career, in your life, then you need to learn to do better in this realm.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to share my opinion on that as well, and I'm hoping you can provide some advice also on this. But because the follow-up question is, okay, well, that sounds good intellectually, but it's very difficult when you're in the moment. And so something that I always think people should do is I think that the conversation needs to start before there's a problem.
Yep.
And so I always think it's a good practice for managers to meet one-on-one with their team or one-on-one with their employees on a regular basis. And if you're doing that and you're talking about their goals and their performance on a regular basis before there's a problem, it becomes easy and obvious when something doesn't go well because the conversation just changes. But I think a lot of times people are afraid of the conversation because, well, if I call the person into my office, they haven't been in my office in 6 months. Or if I give them feedback, maybe they're going to think that I'm a hypocrite. I don't know. There's so much self-talk that goes through, but the conversation could be so worse because there's no other conversation happening, right? So, but what advice would you give? Or maybe you can tear down mine. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm a believer in one-on-ones, and in a one-on-one needs to be, what's the frequency? That depends on the business need, your department need, and the individual employees. Mm-hmm. So my team members, I meet weekly. They each get a half hour, and it is their meeting, which I believe is critical.
Yeah.
Right? This is not a meeting where I call them in and tell them what to do and ask for a return and report. This is about what's on their plate, what challenges are they facing, and how can I help them. So number one, it's their meeting, and it's regular. If I miss that meeting, I have just told them how important they are or not to.
Yeah.
So set those meetings, let it be theirs, and be to them. And then secondly, I always develop, I call it a scorecard of here are the general expectations, and let's get real specific in your role of what's required to deliver excellence. And we've had that conversation. We've established a common language around it. Mm-hmm. Ask them to bring that to their one-on-one every week so that if we have an issue, number one, I've encouraged them to be the ones bringing it up. But if they don't recognize it, I can instantly go to that sheet and say, when we talk about developing your craftsmanship, I've noticed a learning opportunity in this area, and this is how it's affecting the organization. And so we need to work on it together to get you up there. What can we do? And then we build a plan from there.
Yeah.
One-on-ones, and then have something in writing that sets the expectations for how someone can be a rock star.
Yeah. And as I guess we already mentioned, the second that something's not ideal, I mean, that's not the right word to use, but the second that things aren't going well, that's when you start that conversation. You don't worry. And you don't wait until the wheels fall off the bus to bust out that sheet of paper and be like, hey, remember, you got 2 weeks, fix this. It's once you notice something, that's when you share it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Immediately. The minute you get that little feeling, that's your cue to go act on it.
Yeah. And I love that it's about their meeting. One, it allows you to find out what's important to them, but I'd imagine it gives them a little bit more ownership, because they can't walk out of there feeling like they didn't get to share what they wanted to, because it's their agenda, right? So lots of good stuff there.
And it's great when they own it, because then you as a manager know how to coach them on the side throughout the regular day-to-day of life, because you better understand what they're thinking and what they prioritize to bring to that meeting.
Yeah, love it. Tons of good stuff there. And although we're talking about a negative, let's flip around and talk about a positive. Maybe you could tell us to date, what's the proudest moment that you've had or experienced as a manager?
I have to say I get the most joy out of the results that my team members produce. Seeing someone else be successful. I had a particular team member who was really struggling in their role, and it was at a level that I was concerned that their long-term employment would be in jeopardy. Mm-hmm. And I knew that this person that was pretty sensitive to feedback, and had always crafted it very carefully, and I knew I had to get right to the point, and it was going to be a difficult conversation. And so we did. We sat down and we talked about it, and there was stress and there were some tears shed. But we walked away with a plan on how to act on it. And I was so pleased. I mean, pleased isn't even the right word. I was elated to see this employee do a complete 180 on issues that I genuinely had concern, that I hadn't seen that they had the capacity to perform at that level or to accomplish those types of things. And number one, it was a learning thing for me. I thought, wait a minute, as a manager, how was I unaware that talent was in there, and yet I had been incapable of tapping into it to date? But number two, I loved the resiliency of that employee to be faced with this mountain to them, and yet they killed it. They climbed it and they conquered it, and that continues to be a really strong skill for them. So those are the successes that I find true joy in.
Yeah, so good. I mean, it's some of the greatest rewards come through very difficult circumstances, and it even goes back to what you were saying earlier. If you actually care about the people, you're going to get outside of your comfort zone and have those conversations, and they're not always going to work out the way that you just described, but you can feel proud because, to be honest, to make this black and white, that person would not have improved performance without you, and that's the definition of a leader. Taking someone where they wouldn't go without you. So kudos to you, and thank you for sharing that. And now let's jump back into today. And why don't you tell us, Cassie, something exciting that's happening in your world right now?
Well, at BambooHR, we've been around since 2008, but we still maintain a very, I guess, startup mentality here. We have a pretty young and energetic team that are focused on really contributing. And we're continuing to focus our efforts on really influencing the HR world. So we recognize how important it is for HR leaders and even managers who, if you're a manager, you didn't know it, you're part of human resources. You are the front lines and need to know and understand how to help develop and grow your people so that your company has a strategic advantage because of the people talent that you're able to engage and tap into. The thing that we're most proud of is the awards that we've been winning. We have an amazing team here, and our employees consistently rate us as a top place to work, not only in Utah, but in the nation. And so that's been a pure pleasure to see that we're able to maintain a startup culture feel, but then we're seeing all the rewards coming through and loving that our employees are experiencing that. And then with that, we're able to take our product and continue to free up HR professionals and managers to help contribute better towards their organizational needs by using our software, which is focusing on HRIS. And we also have a payroll module. That was a fun thing we just rolled out. So we're super excited about that. Everyone who loves payroll, we got your back.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, payroll's super easy. I don't know why you'd need a solution for that.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, that does sound super exciting, and I'll definitely make sure that I put a link to BambooHR in the show notes so that people can go and learn more and connect there. We are going to run out of time, though, but I do have one and a half questions before we close up, if that's all right with you. So the 1.5 question is, we talk on every show about the importance of self-development. We've talked a lot about how important it is for managers to develop others. But so the 1.5 questions is, maybe you can talk a little bit about the importance of self-development and then recommend a book or two, I guess, that you think first-time managers should pick up when they're learning leadership.
Yeah. Well, you already know how fast the world is changing and the speed of business. You will be left behind if you don't put gas in your own tank. You must focus on self-development. On my team, I make sure I'm doing it, and my team members are doing it. It's goals that we set. Just make sure you're learning something new every week, and then apply what you've learned into your job, into your life. Otherwise, you're going to lose it. The book I would recommend to any manager, I'm a little bit biased. I love it. It's Crucial Conversations. I love the skills that it teaches. I believe better communicators are better managers.
Nice. Well, I will certainly put that book. Why can't I find my words? I'll put that book recommendation in the show notes as well. And as I mentioned, Cassie, it is time to say goodbye. But first of all, thank you so much for your time. If someone wants to connect with you, obviously I'll put it's BambooHR.com. But is there anywhere else that people should connect with you? Like, are you guys hiring right now, or aside from software?
We're always hiring, and you're welcome to connect with me personally on LinkedIn. You can probably find me through our Bamboo information or look me up on LinkedIn.
Nice. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, Cassie. And I will get everything that we talked about today up in the show notes, which are available at yourbestmanager.com. And it's super easy to find. You can just go to yourbestmanager.com. There's a magnifying glass in the top right corner. You can search Cassie, or I suppose you could also probably search Panda, and it might come up as well. And anyway, managers, I'm not sure if you're traveling to or from work today. Getting a workout in or simply taking some time to relax and listen. But I hope that you've been encouraged and inspired from our conversation with Cassie Whitlock. Cassie, thanks again for sharing some of your story with the next generation of leaders. I truly appreciate it, and we will talk soon.
Thanks, Jamie.
All right, everyone, that does it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Now hop over to yourbestmanager.com and take advantage of the free tools, resources, and training which I've created exclusively for you, the next generation of leaders. Oh, and have fun.